Next, I'm going to present on the country reports. What we do each conference is that we invite the various IPC country members to present their crop report, which includes their trade data, estimates for the immediate past year, and certain projections for the next immediate year as to what are they estimating their crop to be, how much exports and area of plantation, etc. Now, due to the travel restrictions, or I would say despite the travel restrictions, the countries have done a fantastic job. All the IPC member countries have submitted the reports, and on behalf of the ED and the whole team, I would like to thank them for submitting their reports. While these are estimates, and some industry participants may agree or may not agree with these estimates, we have to respect the position what the IPC members have presented, and one has to make his own estimation of what could the numbers be looking like. Now, the presentation that I'm going to make has a lot of numbers. I have tried to make it as simple as possible. We have chosen at least 2 or 3 slides for every country, and we made a summary of all the country reports. So can Buddhiman please share the slides from that side? Yeah. So while the title may say demand and supply, we will be focusing much more on supply and crop reports first, and then we would briefly touch upon what is happening on the demand side. Next slide, please. So the structure of presentation is as follows. We look at the country-wise trade and production, starting with Vietnam. We move into India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka. Of course, the non-IPC countries with significant crops such as Brazil, Cambodia, etc., those have been covered, but they have been covered in the balance sheet at the end of the presentation. And finally, we look at the demand and certain forces that are acting on the prices. We are seeing certain questions asked by attendees that when will the price rise, etc. We will discuss all that in the panel discussion. And of course, we cannot give a price guidance as such. You know, the industry participants have to make their own deductions, and based on that, they have to, take actions in the market. So what we will be presenting to you is what has happened in the previous year and what is projected by the IPC members. Next slide, please. Starting with Vietnam, if you look at the graph on the left side, the blue bars are the exports in thousands metric ton, and the orange bars are the imports in 1,000 metric ton. So Vietnam, the largest exporter globally, somewhere close to 50% or maybe even more. If you look at the data, their exports have been steadily increasing from 2000 or 2015 right up to 2019, and then they start sliding. In 2021, Vietnam exported close to 262,000 metric ton and imported 45,000 metric ton. Now, this 45,000 metric ton also includes the flows that came in from the border from Cambodia. If you look at customs data, it is only 25,000 tons, but VPA has made more clear that this 45,000 ton also includes the flows coming from Cambodia. Now, over the years, Vietnam has positioned itself as a processing base for cleaned, whole steam, sterilized, and milled pepper. The exports for 2020 and 2021 lower to the previous years. Now, this is also because perhaps the crop is reducing slowly, and that is also seen that prices are firming up. Vietnam imports Asta black pepper from Brazil and Indonesia, and in 2021 this was including Cambodia around 45,000 tons. Next slide. If we look at the export and import values, while the exports rose from 2015 up to 2019, one could see that the export value which peaked in 2016 at 1.4 billion, started sliding from 1.4 billion to somewhere close to 600 million in 2020, because the prices of black pepper came down from $9 per kilo to $2 per kilo. And that fall in these years has reduced the export turnover, even though the volume would have increased. Likewise, the imports also slid from 200 million to 49 million, and now they are suddenly rising slowly as prices have risen in 2020 and 2021. So if you see in 2021, Vietnam, though it exported slightly lower than what it exported in 2020, the value of export has gone up to 950 million and imports to 125 million. The point here we are making is that the rise in the value of exports is riding on the back of the increase in prices. If we look at the arbitrage or the difference in the export value per ton and import value per ton, from 2015 to 2019, there used to be a healthy arbitrage, and this made it possible for Vietnamese processors who have invested in seam sterilization, in ETO, in cleaning lines, etc., to import black pepper from Indonesia, from Cambodia, from Brazil, bring it into Vietnam, process it, and re-export it. What has happened in 2019 and 2020? The freights have suddenly gone up. And when we are discussing about the new normal, or there are some questions on the new normal, we'll discuss in the panel discussion also what and why we kept the presentations or the theme as sustainability of pepper and aligning with the new normal. One of the significant part of the new normal is that, yes, we are back to normal after the pandemic, or the pandemic may be continuing to stay, but we are getting on with our lives after the vaccination. But still, the new normal here means essentially that the freight rates are not going to go back perhaps to the pre-COVID era. They may slide, but one could not expect a $20,000 container being shipped to the US to go back to $3,000. It may take some time. And this is what one has to understand and align himself with the new normal. And this is where Mr. Rao was presenting that it is not just that one has to depend on origins, but also start putting in systems at the destination to stock, produce, to take care of the supply chain. Because transit times today have increased from 30 days to 60 days to 70 days, whatever you have, because of port congestion, etc. So the point here is the arbitrage is coming down. And this also means that the origins who were shipping to different origins for processing may have to look at actively investing in their origin itself to do value additional processing. Because it will not make perhaps sense for Vietnam to pay $400 per ton freight from Brazil, bring it to Vietnam and process it, and again reship it back to Europe or to USA. So this is what the arbitrage basically shows, that the pain coming from the freight. Next slide. Vietnam production. If we look at the blue curve here, that is the area in hectares. Now, as the prices rose, the farmers planted a lot of black pepper in Vietnam. And once the prices bottomed out, there was enormous pain because they could not recover their investments, and there were foreclosures, etc. And farmers also found more meaning in adopting different crops, and there was a crop shift in planting into passion fruit, into jackfruit, into coffee, etc. And the plantation area steadily dropped, and now it has come even below 100,000 hectares. Production, on the other hand, peaked at around 255,000 tons in 2018. Please also keep in mind, while Vietnam would be exporting 290 or 287, they are also importing 40-50. So you have to add that number to this production number to reach to that export level. The projection or the estimates first for 2021, what we had presented last year were somewhere close to 210 to 220,000 tons. VPA has revised that to 180, and for 2022 they are projecting a number of 162,000 tons. Now, this is coming on the back of less conducive weather, higher farming inputs due to inflation, and less interest by the farmers to enter into new plantations. And that is why the production numbers in Vietnam have been dropping. Next slide, please. So if you look at the Vietnam summary, the balance sheet, before I explain the numbers, I would like to mention that yes, some of the industry participants may feel that the crop for 2021 and 2022 are underballed, and VPA has added or their position is that there was a lot of carryover stock in Vietnam which farmers did not sell, and later when prices started rising, all the stock came to the market and the exports happened. If you look at the red circles, that is basically the total production. For 2020 we were at 240. Now 2021 we have gone down to 180, and then 2022 it is estimated to come down to 162. If you look at the green circles, exports of 286, 263, and what they project for next year is going to be 245. So with the crop coming down, prices going up, the estimation is that the exports also from Vietnam would come down. Let us bear in mind Vietnam, although a very large exporter, does not have very huge domestic consumption. Vietnam's domestic consumption is somewhere close to 8 to 9,000 tons, and not like India or any other country where the large population base determines the domestic consumption. Next slide. Let us look at India. India, which was a net exporter one time, is a net importer now. For 2022, the estimation for domestic consumption is already touching 70,000 tons. They are not able to grow so much, so they are obviously importing a lot of volume. In general, India is importing black pepper from Brazil, from Indonesia, and from other origins, from Vietnam, for processing and re-exporting. Now, when we look at the data for 2021, the total imports were 29,000 tons and exports were 20,000 tons. There is a catch here. For the exports, when we say 20,000 tons, it also includes extracts, which are oleoresins and oils. And the conversion factor for these items could be 8 or 9 or 10 times, because when they import raw material, the extraction, post-extraction, the amount becomes very small. So if we were to just write back that quantity, then the imports and exports would almost balance out for India in terms of imported raw material. The source of imports, as I already mentioned, is Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Brazil, and occasionally Indonesia as well. Yeah, next slide. Next slide, please. Let us look at the breakup of the exports, which is very interesting. If you look at the left graph, you would see that we made 2 red arrows, and then there are black arrows which are tending upwards. The 2 red arrows are basically whole black pepper and whole white pepper. In 2021, the exports of whole black pepper and whole white pepper have reduced. Definitely, the main reason over here is the increasing freights, which reduces the arbitrage. And if there is, so whole black pepper and whole white pepper has the least amount of value addition over there, and therefore it renders the Indian exporters slightly uncompetitive because of increasing freights. But when we looked at milled pepper, green pepper, pepper oil, and pepper oleoresin, the exports have risen because the value addition over there is far, far significant, and that is able to absorb even shocks of freight, which could be 4 or 5 times what were there before the pre-COVID period. And the 70% of exports of India is coming from basically milled pepper, green pepper, oil, and oleoresin, which is much higher on the value addition segment, and they have been able to do pretty well in this period. If you look at the export values per ton, if I look at the total, we see $6,200 per ton for 2020, and 2021 going as high as $7,000 per ton. Pepper oil is somewhere close to $47,000 per ton, and green pepper at $8,000 per ton. Green pepper also includes pepper in brine, etc. So therefore the average value looks slightly lower. Next slide. Well, India production, they have changed the way they report their acreage from 2018. If you would have seen in the presentation of Mr. Rao as well, that Indian pepper farmers plant multiple crops, whether it is pineapple, rubber, or coffee, or multiple crops, and then in that there are pepper vines. So they add up the entire acreage rather than just calculating the acreage of vine, which is very difficult. So from 2019, the area of plantation has been fairly stable, and it is somewhere close to 250,000 hectare, and the production also has been close to 60,000 tons. In 2021, the production was at 67,000 tons, and for 2022, there is a marginal reduction expected at 60,000 tons. Next slide, please. Yeah. So if you look at the Indian summary, the production is expected to be slightly lower on account of weather, old vines, and rising farming costs. The exports of 2022 are expected to drop marginally due to decrease in exports of whole pepper. Domestic consumption is expected to be strong due to the opening up of domestic businesses, especially food service. So as we see, India, although India is growing pepper in multiple provinces, there is still a decent amount of requirement in India, which it's not been able to meet by themselves, and India would be a net importer. Next. Let us look at Indonesia quickly. In 2021, there was an interesting trend in Indonesia. The exports from 58,000 tons in 2020 dropped to 38,000 tons. This was not expected. The main reason for this perhaps was, or what the trade informs us, is a drop in the crop. The crop was lower, and therefore the prices that were available for the domestic market. Here we have to note that Indonesia is a big domestic consumer as well, and therefore the export prices were not competitive enough as compared to the domestic prices, and a lot of pepper went to the domestic market rather than it went for exports. So the reasons for shortages were, as I said, were cutbacks on farm inputs due to inflation, old and senile plantations. Next one. Once again, the area fairly similar at around 188,000 hectare. While the exports were lower, the Indonesian team is saying that the crop was okay at 81,000 tons. Of course, there are questions. If 81,000 tons was the crop, then perhaps the carryover would be higher, and that this is what they have shown in the balance sheet in the next slide. If you look at their exports, which is in the represented by the black arrows, it was at 58,000 tons for 2020, and it dropped to 37,700 for 2021. The stock brought forward in 2021 was 11,500, and now therefore, if the crop was 81, the stock carry forward is 29,700 as reported by them. This carry forward is, one could have good discussion on this, because had the carry forward been so high, perhaps the Indonesian prices would have come down, but they are not. They're going up. Of course, they may be following Brazilian and Vietnamese prices, but as reported, the stock carry forward perhaps is higher. And for 2022, Indonesia is projecting once again a decent crop of 89,000 tons, slightly higher than what they projected for 2021. Next. Quickly, we look at Malaysia. Once again, a very stable crop. Malaysia is producing somewhere in the range of 20,000 tons, and they have maintained that. The area in 2016 and 2017 used to be somewhere close to 16,000 hectares. The area has dropped as the prices came off. However, whatever was left due to good intervention by the participants in Malaysia, the yields have gone up, and with the same, with lower hectares, they are able to produce higher quantities of production. If you look at their trade, export and import, in 2021, their exports were close to 7,000 tons, slightly shy of what they did in 2020. But in general, they used to do around 12,000 tons from 2016 to 2018, but that is now reduced, and it has been reducing from 2019, and they're exporting less, perhaps because domestic consumption is also rising. The major destination for Malaysian pepper is essentially Japan, while for other countries they have been shipping to multiple destinations as such. But for Malaysia, Japan is one of the most important markets. Next. Quickly looking at Sri Lanka, if you all could recollect, there was economic distress which led to currency depreciation. And if you look at the 2021 number, the exports have suddenly gone or more than doubled from 7,000 tons in 2020 to 16,000 tons. Currency depreciation also reduces the export price, and of course, the country was in need of US dollars, and they have exported a large portion of what they grow, and they exported 16,000 tons. So while they produce only 24 to 25,000 tons, less went to the domestic market, and significant portion of it got exported. Next slide. So now we come to the global balance sheet, where we have two sections. One is the IPC countries, which includes India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam. Let me just explain this table to you first before we look at the numbers. On the leftmost column, we have the country name. We also have included Brazil, China, Thailand, Madagascar, Cambodia, Ecuador, etc., which form part of the non-IPC member countries, which are growing significant amount of pepper. On the top, we look at 2021 estimation and 2022 projections. Stock brought forward is basically the carryover from the previous year, which is brought forward into the year. Production is the crop output. Imports are mentioned here. Then after import comes the domestic consumption and then the export. So the stock brought forward into next year is essentially the total available pepper subtracted by what was taken out. So stock brought forward plus production plus import, less domestic consumption and less export will be equal to the stock brought forward. If you look at India, we've already mentioned that the production is marginally lower from 67,000 tons to 60,000 tons. The stock brought forward in India is also quite similar and balanced. The exports in India are expected to be 19 to 20,000 tons. The key factor over here is there is going to be large domestic consumption in India, which is expected for 2022. Indonesia, once again, the production is expected to be slightly better from 81,000 tons go to 89,000 tons. Although this is, as I said, debatable because the production in 2021 was not good enough. And so perhaps this is slightly at a higher base, and because of being at a higher base, one sees a large amount of stock being brought forward, and therefore the carry forward at the end of 2022 increases from 29 to 54. Malaysia is fairly constant, Sri Lanka is fairly constant. Vietnam, if you look at the stock brought forward for 2021, they have revised the estimation and they say it is at 124,000 tons. And the crop was actually for 2021 at 180, and despite that, they were able to achieve an export of 264. So 180 plus 45 is 220, and then they had a lot of stock there. So 40,000 tons came out from the stock there with the farmers, and as prices rose in 2021, this got exported. 2022, the carry forward reduces as a large quantity got exported. And the crop again projected is somewhere close to 162,000 tons. Imports would be similar, and therefore the stock carry forward after 2022 would be lower. When looking at Brazil, we do not have clear estimates on the stock brought forward or carry forward. However, we do know that Brazil exported 92,000 tons in 2021, and the crop for Brazil in 2022 is expected to be slightly higher or similar. From 99,000 tons reaching 101. Some people are at 95, some are at 110. So the average estimates are coming to 100,000 tons. China, again, fairly constant because only one province, that is the province in Hainan, grows pepper at 30,000 tons. and we are looking at a large domestic consumption there as well, close to 75,000 tons, which is very near what India is consuming. All other countries are pretty much similar. Cambodia, again at 20,000 tons. So when we look at the totals, the global production for 2021 was at 537,000 tons, which moves to 522,000 tons. So whatever the numbers, it is important that one looks at the difference. And once one looks at the difference is what one gets the real picture that what is going to happen perhaps in the next year, and we see in the next slide. So if you look at production, 2021, 537,000 tons, and 2022, it is going to be slightly lower at 522,000 tons, which is a drop of 3%. Now, this is the difference. If somebody would say that, no, 2021 numbers were slightly underballed, so were numbers of 2022. So the difference remains constant over there, and the difference is coming somewhere close to 3% drop. Imports are also going to drop because as production is going to drop, countries are going to need pepper for their own domestic consumption, and therefore they will not be able to perhaps import more. Likewise, export also may drop because the overall production is dropping. Domestic consumption is increasing, and therefore the carry forward is going to reduce by somewhere close to 8%. So these are numbers are fairly consistent in terms of when we look at them, because the percentages, one must remember, are at a different base. When I say 3% drop at 500,000 of production, it is 15,000 tons. So we are going to see that the production is dropping by 15,000 tons, and carry forward also drops by somewhere around 16,000 tons. So production and carry forward both drop by those 30,000 tons on an overall basis, which brings somewhere close to 5 to 6% of removal of inventory from the system. Because if you say production and carry forward put together, we are going to get somewhere close to 30,000 tons out from the system. Then there is going to be that small difference of 5 to 6% happening over there. Next, quickly we look at what is happening globally. Factors causing gradual increase in demand. Essentially, growing population in the developing world, higher protein consumption with increasing incomes. Now, one may contest that, okay, there may be certain negative sentiment toward meat consumption, although meat consumption keeps increasing. Yes, but we are not essentially talking of meat, we are talking of protein consumption. Even if you are going to consume plant-based protein, you would still need seasoning to season your plant-based protein. So as long as incomes are rising, protein consumption rises, yes, pepper is directly correlated to protein consumption. Preference for natural color and taste in the developed world is coming up. Preference to use natural ingredients, nutraceuticals, healthcare, skincare, etc. Is growing at a rate much higher than the consumption just because of the food category. Factors that could undermine the growth rate of demand, one must consider this in the new normal now. While everybody expected that, okay, you are going to stay at home during the COVID, one very interesting fact is that globally the birth rates post-COVID have been dropping. And this drop in birth rates in the short term may not be of very big significance, but in the long term, 10, 15 years from now, this is going to change the dynamic where which will impact demand of pepper consumption. Of course, inflation is again a part of the new normal. Fertilizer is getting expensive, labor cost is getting expensive. Cost of farming has increased significantly in the last 2 years. Land prices have gone above the roof. And then changing in eating habits are also happening. Maybe perhaps people are going, or they're wanting to go to restaurants, but they can do away with still eating at home because you know what happened for the last 2 years. So there could be change in eating habits happening, which may also impact demand for pepper. Quickly, the last slide. Now, forces acting on the prices in 2022. As I said, we cannot give a guidance on whether it will go up or go down. That is not what we can tell the participants or attendees, but what we can tell is what is happening around, which may perhaps help you to make certain decisions and trade accordingly. Now, there is enough downward pressure. And what is the downward pressure? it is expected that the global interest rates may increase as the Fed withdraws on its program of buying bonds, and they start raising interest rates because of high inflation. A lot of money may get filtered out from the system, which will reduce the ROI on speculation once interest rates rises. Again, this is a possibility. See, the demand may normalize after the spike in 2021. What happened in 2020 and 2021 is, as the pandemic hit, as a consumer, you go to a retail mall and you buy what you were going to buy for 1 week, you buy for 3 months, 4 months. Suddenly all the shelves are empty, and the purchasing managers realize, that not more stock is coming because the ships are getting delayed, and there is, a double stock out situation. Once there is the inventory has ended in the pipeline, and whatever has been ordered is going to be delayed. And the prices were luckily very low, so most of them just went wrong and they just bought a lot of pepper. So there could be a lot of pepper lying around in destination where they bought more in the previous year. Large importing countries such as Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, etc., due to inflation and due to other pressures, they've seen their currencies depreciate by over 30%. Now, once your currency depreciates by 30%, the cost of import just rises. If you were buying a container of pepper for $70,000, now it is going to cost you $100,000. That limits the ability of stockists or wholesalers to stock, produce, and trade, because they require a large amount of working capital now. Large importing countries such as I said, uncertainty on freight continues, and inability to enter forward contracts leads to spot trade. So the exporters, on the other hand, in the origin now, are not freely or willingly giving forward contracts, which they were doing previously, and the trade has moved into a spot trade. So the farmers cannot squeeze the exporters in the sense that, okay, if somebody's short, then he does panic buying, but right now there is no need for panic buying. At the same time, there is equally good argument for upward pressure. Global supply growth continues to be in negative territory, slightly reducing every year. No new plantations in Vietnam as land prices have risen. Perhaps in Brazil, the plantations continue. Then there are climate change aspects of El Nino, La Nina, drought, too much rainfall, spatial distribution of rain is not good enough, and that is causing uneven spiking of berries, etc. Global demand continues to grow moderately, growing in terms of consumption. Sentiment amongst growers continues to be bullish than bearish. Increased cost of farming due to rising fertilizer and labor costs, increased freight rates, and rising domestic demand in China and India. So there is equal enough or good argument for upward pressure on prices as well. Yeah, so that's it. Would like to wrap up my presentation, and I will